Hello and welcome to Road to the KO, the weekly program where we talk all things knockout. And we've got a couple of deadly fellas with me to talk all things KO, including premiership winner with the Manly Seagulls and countless knockouts for Walgett, George Rose, and also former captain coach of Mindaribba Warriors, who's done plenty in bush footy as well, in Ronald Griffiths. How are you, boys? Hey, Georgie.
Yeah, how you going?
Good to have you on the show, brother.
Good to be here, good to be here. I've been watching it online. It's been going good. Looking forward to this.
Me too.
Yeah, deadly show, Road to the KO. It's it's something that's been needed for a long time. It's great to be here. Thanks, Brad.
Well, I've got a couple of guys who know plenty about it and not afraid to have their say, as our old friend Jeffrey Choco Johnson did last week in regards to suspensions and judiciary. And we got a lot of good feedback too from all of you mob out there tuning in through our Facebook page. And just wanted to summarise some of the comments that we received. Some of those comments are that people are just plain confused how it all works. Why are players not allowed to play in the KO but are also suspended when they go back to their comps next season? Also people saying it's the people's knockout. It's a cultural event and suspensions should be waived unless they're serious. Maybe they're attacking a referee or they're extended 8 weeks, or maybe they've been suspended for using drugs. So for those more serious suspensions. Also, because it's a sanctioned event, why can't players use the KO to play out their suspensions? Definitely something people are saying. And also, how do suspended players differ from non-registered players around those insurance issues? So I wanted to open that up to two guys who know plenty. George, you've been involved in coordinating an event, as have you, Ronald. This issue's popped up time and time again over the years. First of all, your thoughts on some of the comments we've received.
Yeah, it's interesting. Everyone's got an opinion, obviously. I know myself personally playing this year with the Oberon Tigers, I was mindful of it as we came towards the end of the season. You think, you don't want to get suspended because you want to be right to play in the knockout. So it's a contentious issue, and we were sort of backing off a little bit the last few rounds and making sure that we weren't suspended because the knockout means so much, and I didn't want to miss out on it personally. So I think it's sort of up to the organisers, isn't it? Each year, they decide how they're going to run it, and it's just one of them rules at the moment.
It is up to the organisers, but it's extremely tough. You've got small bush clubs that are trying to facilitate with 64 teams with 25 players, and working out a path or a way that suits everyone's a difficult thing, and maybe harnessing the CRL to bring them on board to help with that, and really working out a way forward so suspended players may be able to play, or in black and white they can't play. I just think that there's probably got to be some clarity and also some work put into whether it is feasible or not. And from a point of view, if players are playing and they're not registered through the year, I think that if they come and play in the knockout, because it's a CRL sanctioned event, they are then insured for that weekend of rugby league only. So that's probably how they can, how they're allowed to play there.
Personal opinions though, would you like to see people waived for it?
Look, I don't know. I don't really care unless it sort of affects me. It probably, wouldn't be an issue that I'd really care about until I'm actually affected by it. Like I think Choco was affected by it for last year's knockout. So
yeah.
Obviously he'd be filthy, and I reckon I'd be the same if I was in his position.
Also, one of our viewers wanted to mention, Jason Allen was the man who wanted to mention that maybe we have some tiered knockouts that we're seeing. There's very top heavy. There's a lot of teams who turn out each year and can win the knockout, but there's so many teams who, in his words, were cannon fodder for the rest of those quality teams with NRL players and players of real note in their teams. Any thoughts around a tiered competition?
I think there is a tiered competition already in the pre-knockouts that you have. I think I know out at Walgett there's 16 teams who travel out to Walgett every week, and they're community teams, memorial teams. I think there's 3 or 4 teams that actually play from Walgett. So obviously the standard is below the big knockout level, but it's an opportunity for everyone to be a part of a knockout as well.
Yeah, I think the big thing is they're still able to be a part of it. I'm not sure the tiered system would work. Again, if you had an overarching body and really put some work into the stuff away from the park with the knockout, I think that you could look at an option that suits everyone. You don't want to be travelling from wherever it is. It might be Mindaribba. You don't want to go there and play one game. It could end up in a repechage system. There are different ways, but I just think that the right people need to sit down and have that discussion about a way forward. We've got the best product there is, the best rugby league product there is, no doubt. It's a matter of now moving it forward.
So I think the attraction of the knockout too isn't only going there to play footy. It's going there for that whole weekend to be around everyone, 20,000 blackfellas in one place, and you go there to be around everyone and experience it. So if you lose the first game, I know it's happened to us a few times, you lose the first game and you just enjoy the weekend then. You enjoy going out that night with everyone and backing up and watching the footy for the rest of the weekend. So I think even though you miss out on playing more than one game, you still get to be part of the whole experience, and I think that's what makes the Koori Knockout different to a lot of other events.
Definitely. The year that we got beat at Raymond Terrace on the Sunday afternoon by the Yowies, that was the first time in 4 years I'd actually been able to sit down and watch a game of knockout football. You know, I sat in the commentary box with you because normally we'd play one game and that's it. We go home. We get ready for the next day. Play 3 games on the Sunday. We're focusing on that. You know, so I got to sit there and watch a game and commentate, and it was an experience that I hadn't done for a long time, and I loved it. It was good. Yeah. I didn't want to lose, but don't get me wrong.
No, I'm sure you didn't. 5 grand finals in a row for Mindaribba was pretty impressive. But instead of a tiered system, I actually wanted to go the other way of what Jason was suggesting, in that I wanted to protect the better teams from not being knocked out in the first round. And I know that's what knockouts are all about. You know, if you know, like a couple of years ago, Lapa drew Walgett in the first round, and Walgett towed them up pretty badly and sent a team who'd prepared quite well, spent obviously a lot of money to get there, and were knocked out. And that was just the nature of knockout footy. It's happened to you guys a couple of times. But also, if you want to have better games in the back end, if you had the opportunity to have a seeded system perhaps, whereas when you put your team forward, the top 32 teams on paper were seeded to play against, I guess, the bottom 2 teams in the 32. If you had a 64-team competition.
Yeah, I don't agree with that. I reckon that is showing favouritism to the better teams. It should be a fair playing field. Like, there are teams there that are, as you say, aren't quite as good as some of the top teams. But if you're giving preferential treatment to the better teams, like, that's not fair. That's not fair. You've got to give everyone a fair go. Like, we've drawn hard teams first round, second round before, and been knocked out, and you just got to cop it sweet. It sucks, but you got to cop it. You know, look, it's not fair if you say there's a team from wherever that they've got to go up against. They've got to go up against Walgett first round just because Walgett's a better team, and you know, that's the seeding of it all. It doesn't matter. Like, everyone's got to get a fair go.
And you're playing right into Jason's comment earlier about that tiered competition. You know, that's too bad for those big teams that they meet each other. Just like it would be too bad if a fledgling team trying to put a family team together, or whatever, comes up against the Guns. So you might have yourself a little point there, Jason Allen.
Before you go, they talk about draws win knockouts all the time. And, you know, for me personally, if you get someone like Lapa or Walgett first up, it just sets up your weekend, I personally believe. Even though you think, hey, they're a tough team, you know, we need to be on our game to beat them, you know what's going to come from there. You know, you're going to be playing the best football you can for the rest of the weekend because you're up on, you know, for game 1. So, yeah.
Well, 2 of our knockout wins came on the back of that. We thought Lapa were going to be a really hard team that time we played them, and that's the most prepared we've been for a knockout for the first round, and we went on to win that year. Same thing happened in Woy Woy when we played Wollumben first game. We knew we had to be on for that game. We went on to win the knockout, so it does, you know, switch you on regardless of who you draw.
We also wanted to talk about pathways, and thanks to Carlos Fagelli, who raised, you know, what are those partnership opportunities for the 15s, 17s at knockouts, and why are those competitions so important? And since in recent years they've added the under 12s to that as well. And I wanted to ask Ronald Griffiths, who's been part of that development system of 15s through the years, why are they so important, Ronald?
Yeah, I'll probably kick off with the men's first of all, if I can. I'll just digress a little bit. Just when we talk about pathways, we've had 4 guys that have played with Mindaribba over the years that have then gone on to play NRL. And, you know, when we spoke to them about, you know, do they attribute any of what was happening through our knockout process, you know, do they believe that, you know, they all said it held them in good stead to play knockout. When we talk about the junior pathways, I believe that's the key forward for self-determination for Aboriginal people. You know, we were able to give them the life skills, the education skills, and then, you know, give them a career beyond rugby league, but also, you know, if they're good enough, a career with rugby league. And we need to go back to the age group of 12 and then work our way back through there. And there's lots of opportunities for kids, you know. If they're playing in the 15s at the knockout, they can then go and represent, you know, and play against the Queensland team at the before the interstate or the All-Stars clash. You know, the 17s, we would like to think that there are NRL scouts there watching the games, whether they're in, you know, whether they're at the ground or watching it on TV. The kids are still getting exposure, and if they're good enough, hopefully getting picked up.
Yeah, well, just on that, like last year at Dubbo, I had scouts ringing me up on while the games are playing, they were saying, "Oh, can you send me the team list for so and so and so and so?" They were watching players play, and they were very impressed. They wanted to sign them up. So it is being watched on TV, and there are scouts who are interested in it. So I think it's a great pathway, and it's good that everyone gets to showcase their talent.
Look, just on that, I mean, when we're doing our games and commentary on NITV, we actually do need to know a bit about the kids that are being put forward in the background. So what we're actually asking you to do is give us some background on them. Where are they playing their week in, week out footy? Where are they possibly up for representation? Are people looking at them already? Because then we're able to share that story and build them up a little bit. So if the scouts are watching, they go, all right, we need to get hold of that kid. Because that's simple. It's certainly for the women as well. We're doing the women's finals on the Monday. They're getting All-Stars opportunities. 4 of our girls play for New South Wales in the mainstream team, which finally knocked off Queensland for the first time. So pathways are developing for the kids, the women, and recently too, the under-12s competition. It's only been in a few years, but our La Perouse juniors are now actually winning competitions in the South Sydney comp from the 12s through to the 14s. It's been remarkable.
It's fantastic. The other thing too with the women's is also the New South Wales Rugby League. We've got a side that plays obviously to trial for the All-Stars, but there's a New South Wales arm of the Women's Rugby League that our girls are getting noticed for. Next year they've got the under-18s comp for the ladies, so it'll be good for a good opportunity for girls to play in the knockout and then hopefully get picked up and play through play for a club throughout the year.
Women's Rugby League, it's on the way up. And I know the NRL people are going to be out there from the Friday through to the Monday to be watching the girls, and that's where the All-Stars side or squad will be picked from. So it's a huge opportunity for the girls to go out there and showcase their skills, because to get the chance to play before the Indigenous All-Stars game is great.
We've talked about pathways on how people can get to NRL or even to these new women's competitions. We hope to have a fully fledged women's competition going soon too to rival the NRL. But what about the NRL players themselves? George, you've been an NRL player for over 10 years. How hard is it for NRL players to come back and play in knockouts?
It is difficult. You obviously got issues with your club. You're contracted to an NRL club, and you're property of them for that period. So they don't want you getting hurt, and that's usually what stops you from being able to play. I've had a few issues where I remember in Armidale, the year that we won it in Armidale, I had Steve Gigg from Manly Seagulls. He was calling non-stop all weekend. He was calling me. He was calling Wok. He was calling Matt. I ended up checking my voicemails after we finished the knockout, and they started off, "George, do not play. Do not play. You do not have permission to play. George, answer your phone. You're not allowed to play." And then the last one was, "Hey George, congratulations on the win. Hope you pulled up all right. Hope there's no injuries. Give us a call."
But after that particular game, you wouldn't have been feeling any injuries, because that was a big win.
Yeah, it was massive. That was our first ever time winning the knockout, and definitely our best.
He wasn't playing that time, but you beat Ronald's community there in Mindaribba, and with what I believe the greatest ever game of rugby league was the 2009 knockout grand final. 44 all at full time. Second half extra time, Sean Daylight scores a try. Not the first time I mentioned a hero to the KO, but it's an exciting game. What was it like an experience to win that KO?
Look, I know there's footage of me crying after the game. They were trying to interview me, and all I could do was sob. And I think I said "up Walgett." That was all I got out. But
I think there's a couple of swear words in there as well.
It's so hard to get through a weekend and win the knockout. I don't know how Minder got to that point so many times without winning. If you've got to put your body on the line so hard to get there and play that last game on a Monday and walk away without a win, I don't know how I'd want to turn up again the year after. Every time we've got to that point, I've said I'm not doing it again next year. I'm done. A couple of weeks later, when I freshen up, I'm like, yeah, can't wait for it. But it is just too hard of a weekend. It's too hard to do. It's near impossible. So when you do achieve it, best feeling ever.
It's happened a lot, hasn't it? Teams going down. La Perouse went down twice in a row. Mindaribba went down twice in a row and came back and won it that third year in 2011. Newcastle All Blacks have to bounce back after losing 2 in a row now as well.
That was heartbreaking to watch. That one.
It was tough.
It was there.
Yeah.
It was there. Wow.
All the way to the end. Ronald, 2011 comes along, and how do you get your team up for that third year to say, come on guys, we lost the last 2, but we can win this year?
Yeah, that's an interesting one. I had a conversation after last year's grand final, last year's knockout with Mick Young, and he spoke about, we spoke about what didn't work for him. I wasn't involved last year, I had a break, and what didn't work for him. One thing that echoes with me and rings true is Mick said we believed in everything that you spoke about and wanted us to do. For me, that was a glowing endorsement of me as a coach. But I respected all the players. I give them ownership of what we were trying to do, and I just sort of, I believe pointed them in the right direction. But it was more so the players. They had buy-in. They wanted it. It was a burning ambition for all of them. Not only that, we had the right sort of people. They had the right attitude. Over the years, we sort of there was people that came and went. Anyone that wanted to that loved the club stayed there for a long period of time. When we initially talked to players, it wasn't about 1 year. It was always a plan to stay there for as long as you wanted and as long as that you're willing to put in the work. And I suppose that was how we kept bouncing back, because we had players with the right attitude who wanted to work hard for each other. We always had standards. The way we train was exceptional. We trained very hard. We mightn't have been the most talented team, but we worked extremely hard, and that's what we built our knockout wins on the back of.
You were coach and captain. You played in that 2011 year as well. Was that a more difficult task?
No, not really. No, we had people around us that we could trust. The team were leaders amongst themselves. What we did at training, our preparation was perfect. We were going into that knockout, and we played an extra game that weekend compared to Ewan. But we knew that we were fit enough to do it, and we focused. Personally, I believe that we changed the mindset of the knockout, how you need to prepare. Ours was built on the back of hard work and just a simple game plan. And I just think that there was teams that took a leaf out of our book. So to answer your question, no, it wasn't hard. It was easy, mate, because our preparation was spot on.
Yeah, Ronald Griffiths there talking about the experience in 2011, and then, believe it or not, Mindaribba went on and played in the next two grand finals in 2012 and 2013. That's 5 GFs in a row. Remarkable effort. And here on Road to the KO, a lot of the people out there in the community have been asking about the way in which the organisations run the knockout and whether or not a body itself should take over from the winning team each year hosting the knockout. Personally, I actually do agree with the comments that we need an overall organisation to host the knockout each year, or at least to help the winning team host a knockout each year, because it's just too hard for one body to take over from year in, year out. Both these two guys have had the role in their community hosting it each year. It's probably the toughest thing you can do, isn't it, coming fresh into hosting a knockout?
Well, I know for us, we've never been able to defend the title after winning it. There is a lot of work that goes into hosting a knockout, and full credit to Matt, Mark and Jeffo for the amount of work that they've put in to running the knockout each time, because I think they've done a great job, and I think the finished product was always really good. There's always an issue of passing on that information to the next teams to let them have the opportunity to run it just as good or better. It is difficult. I think there's a lot of people who do call for a governing body, but you've seen what's happened with that in the past. How do you elect that body? I don't know. I don't know how it comes around.
Yeah, I think it's got some real merit. When we run it, we obviously got a lot of the information from yourselves about what worked and what didn't work, different sponsors that we could approach. But I think there is some real merit. We talk about development. I mean, there's no reason that we couldn't have like the 15s playing, for a week or 3 days leading up to the knockout. If there was a governing body that had the money, or could generate the money, then that team could then be selected to maybe compete in the under 16s comp, like the Harold Matt, something like that. If we harness the State Land Council, who are our peak body, and really utilise them, that have a lot of pull, that have a lot of pull with government, also funding bodies, then we might be able to have our own team in the 16s, our own team in the 18s, our own girls team in the 18s, things like that. So I just think that we've got the best rugby league product there is. It's a matter of trying to move forward away from the park a little bit. And you use the game, the NRL, the CRL, the New South Wales Rugby League, they don't have ownership of it. It's always going to be ours, no matter what. But if we incorporate them with, say, the State Land Council, and then the team in the middle that wins it, they're working with them. I just think that there's a lot of merit in it personally. Again, it's a conversation that needs to be had by a lot of different people, I personally believe.
And having that organisation body and the Land Council, you can actually have collective buying power. So then if those groups can actually go out and you've got 64 teams, you've got other ones in all the kids in the women's divisions, how many jumpers, socks, shorts you need to buy in advance, you can actually go out and get a huge big bulk deal which will save the community tons of money to try in getting there. they could also be, I'm sure the host organisations, work with accommodation, try and make it easier for communities, but it's so hard to try and do all those things. But with a body, you might be able to get there. The State Land Council thing I really like, because there are 9 regions within the State Land Council borders. So what I believe is to take a lot of pressure off host teams winning and hosting and not being able to do it. And also, I'm a city boy, and I hear the groans from the bush teams every year. Don't let the city teams win it. I don't want to have to go all the way to Redfern or Newcastle or those sort of areas. It takes that hatred, if you like, away from knockout. So I reckon you rotate it in each of the 9 regions if they're logistically able to host it in those areas, so you know where it's going to be. It also takes the financial burden off families to get to every knockout each year, because next year it's a little bit closer to home and I can afford to get to the next one. So there are definitely a lot of bonuses from that.
You talk about collective buy-in. If you had it in each of those 9 regions, it could be cost neutral for the club that wins it, but it also could be cost neutral for other clubs. It could be an agreement with that city council. Hey, this is what we need in accommodation. This is the revenue the knockout's going to create. When we bring it to your electorate. But this is what we need: in-kind services, accommodation, security, all that sort of stuff. So when you talk about collective bargaining, it's got a lot of power. I just don't think we're quite harnessing it right. But that's not to take away from a team who wins it. I know they want to take it to their hometown, and that's been the knockout for 46 years. So, but I just think there's merit in doing things the other way as well.
Yeah, no, I think it's a massive change of what the knockout's sort of always been about. I think that's the one thing that has always been great about it, is that it does travel around, and the reward for winning the knockout is you get to reward your community. You get the bragging rights of hosting the knockout. I think if you're rotating it around to these centres, like what advantage does your team get if you bust your ass and you win the knockout? Because it's hard to do. It's really hard to do, and a lot of work goes into getting a knockout team together and then winning it. What reward do you get if Walgett wins a knockout and it's then held in Sydney? What reward do we get out of that? What do I get to give to my community on the back of that? Like, we're able to assist the rugby league, the school programs and stuff like that on the back of our winning results. But if you're taking that away from the winning team, what advantage do they get? What reward do you get for winning?
So perhaps the reward could be that the community that wins it is provided the opportunity next year to have all of your costs associated with getting to the next knockout covered. It could also, whatever prize money there, could be invested in your junior league. Because that's really what a lot of people want to see. They don't want to see teams that may or may not have been stacked or top heavy to win knockouts in the right to host it the next year. We don't know which of the committees running knockouts are above board and doing the right things with all the money that are made from knockouts. And there's no assertions made about any community doing the wrong thing. But what I'm saying is, take the risk away with organisations there, and money is invested in those winning communities into their football, so that growth is set for life in those communities, and that they are supported to get there the next year, because the hardest part of a knockout is having to travel.
Yeah, but you say that that's going to support them for 1 year. What then happens the year after? What you can do by hosting the knockout, then you're looked after for a number of years. I know it probably doesn't matter to your team, as you might have a really good sponsor, but there's been a number of years where we almost didn't make it to the knockout because we couldn't raise enough money. There's only so many raffles you can do, only so many 100 clubs you can run. If the money's not there, you can't get sponsorship, and it costs a lot to, as you say, it costs a lot to get there. And on the back of winning it, you're then covered for a couple of years. Like, you can't just say, okay, we'll get your accommodation that for next year, because you still got the year after. You're not really getting a reward out of it.
I think one big thing that, I understand where you're coming from, George, but one thing that I think that we could really, if you got someone like the Newswalk on board, they're the largest private landholders in New South Wales. It mightn't be about putting money back into the community. It might be about, hey, we're going to grant you this ground, and we're going to build a football oval there for you, and amenities, things like that. I think that having a conversation with a wider demographic and people that are business savvy, generate that sort of, could generate that sort of interest and those sort of things to happen. And just your other point, mate, sorry, about what the knockout was initially set up for. For me personally, it was set up to bring community together, which it will still do in those 9 regions, and promote players to play at the highest level when it comes to in rugby league. It still will do that. But I understand it does probably in the first instance take away from the community if you're not hosting it there. But there's more than one way to skin a cat, and I just think that it's something that really needs to have some research put into it.
So if you reckon Newswalk is able to would have that capability to be able to upgrade grounds and facilities in communities, what's stopping them from doing that now?
I don't know if they have got that capability. They've got a lot of land is what I'm saying. And
I think it'd be great if they could do that. Like, I know the Barwon Darling competition, which is the Walgett region, the standard of that competition has nothing on the Newcastle competition, which is where you've got Yowies, Minda, NAB, a lot of great teams have them players playing in that standard, which is it's probably that far off reserve grade NRL level. So you've got players playing in that competition week in, week out, whereas our boys, if they want to step up a level to another competition, they've got to travel to they've got to travel to Group 11, to Group 10, to other places to try and get at that standard or something closer to being better. It's a lot more difficult for country teams to have that strong competition week in, week out, and the facilities aren't as good, the grounds aren't as good, games get called off because of rain. But that's the advantage that Newcastle and Sydney teams have, is that they've got strong competitions week in, week out, they've got access to great sponsorships, and it's a lot easier for them teams to come together, I believe.
Talk to me about ballpark figures. What does a knockout cost to run? You both had a chance to do it. Just ballpark figure. Mob out there wouldn't have a clue about this, and I actually don't even know how much it costs. I talk about it must be expensive, but what are we talking about?
Well, just to go to a knockout, you'd be looking at 40 to 50 if you're taking one team.
But what about hosting it? What are the risks associated with hosting it? What's it cost to run one?
I think it's a very costly process. As I said, I wasn't heavily involved in that process, but it's hundreds of thousands of dollars to run a quality knockout.
Definitely.
You can take shortcuts if you want, but you're not going to deliver a good product. It costs a hell of a lot of money, and you don't make as much as you think that you do.
The one thing I wanted to touch on, boys, is with the involvement maybe of a Newswalk. They've got 120 local land councils around the state. An issue that pops up every time at the knockout, where there are protests, there are people involved, and it sort of has that grey area, pardon the pun, identity. Who is an Aboriginal person playing in the Koori knockout each year, and are you Aboriginal? The Land Council involvement could see that every player over the 18 maybe be registered as a member of the local Aboriginal Land Council, which then determines that you are able to play in the Koori knockout.
Well, aren't they the ones who sign off on the confirmations of Aboriginality anyway?
Not always.
No, there's other organisations
that do it too. Who are able to do that. But I'm saying that then takes away the pressure. If a player is questioned, then that local Aboriginal Land Council comes in and says, no, this person is registered as a member and eligible to play. Because we have those issues every year, don't we? Yeah. Well, I mean, that's why I think having Newswalk involved, they've got that location, the 9 regions, they can support financially, got collective buying power, rotate around the 9 regions, identity. There's a lot of things being ticked off here where having a body associated could really cut out a lot of the issues.
Just with the identity thing, if you've got every player who's over 18 is a member of a local land council, that again gives us more buy-in when we go to the government and say, hey, we need some money for this, or we need some support, in-kind support. Our membership is this big. We're the largest private landholder in New South Wales, You get real power when you're able to do that. But there is an issue with that. Obviously, there are people, no doubt, that are members of local Aboriginal land councils that are not, of Aboriginal descent. That process isn't quite right either, I believe. And I can speak of that because I was the chairperson of a land council for 8 years. So, it definitely needs, some work put into it, the identity of people, or proving that you're Aboriginal to play in the knockout.
Well, boys, thanks so much for spending some time and talking some footy here on Road to the KO.
Thanks for having me on Road to the KO, Brad. It's been great.
Thanks, man. I'll be putting it on Facebook, telling everyone to watch us.
Pump it. We need you to get it out there, you fellas. Thanks very much to Ronald Griffiths and George Rose for joining us this week. I also want to thank Bill Bashford, who gave us the question around who is your favourite knockout player of all time. We want to hear from you, and we'll get the best ones up on our screens, and go to our Facebook page where you can find plenty of questions there for you to join us here on the program. See you next time.